Welcome to another episode of Chad Sports Talk. My name's Chad. Take a dive on sports. And welcome to part 3 of my fix of the FBS. In my previous videos, I've covered a modest approach of streamlining and fixing some of the conferences in the FBS. The second video covered my extreme makeover, making the Power 5 14 members, the Group of 5 12 members, leaving the military academies as their own entity, separate, independent group. And when I was making those, after releasing that first one, thanks to Ethan Toller, one of my viewers here, he mentioned that Iowa State is no longer AAU member, so more likely the Big Ten would invite them in now. And I'll go over some of these scheduling ideas I have for the FBS. Probably a little bit radical and probably a little bit left field. Some of the ideas I had, things have kind of changed around because thanks to the NCAA, they've kind of implemented some things. But before I dive into all of that, if you could go ahead and smash that thumbs up for me, especially like the content provider. It really pleases you two guys. It really helps promote the channel out. You go subscribe. Let you guys review my work, and that means subscribe. This costs you a dime and helps me provide more entertainment value for you. Now let's go ahead and go over this the conference realignment fiasco I created myself. Because I said the Big Ten should probably go after Notre Dame, even though they're not AAU members. They are R1 Research University. It's one of those things that they would just have to apply. I think they would just accept them anyways, just because of the status of Notre Dame and bring them into the conference. And also said Iowa State, which was an AAU member, but there was a growing consensus in the AAU of possibly voting them out, like they did Nebraska. So Iowa State just went, no, we quit, we walk away. So they removed themselves from AAU, but they're still R1 Research University, much like the entire Pac-12, pretty much the entire SEC. They're all in that same boat of the very high ranking of the R1 Research Universities, which all AAU schools are in that category as well. So then I had to really look at which AAU currently that could be added. Because Syracuse was an idea, but they are no longer in it. And if you look at Missouri, which I think is more in the Big Ten footprint, they're not going to leave the SEC. Same thing with Vanderbilt or Florida, Texas. None of them are leaving that. And like I said, they won't go out to the Pac-12 and snag, Washington or USC or anything like that. That just makes no sense. So you're looking at that. And then once again, that gives you Kansas in the Big 12. And I don't think they won't grab Kansas because their football program is suspect. There'll be more of a basketball grab. So I think what the Big 12 is going to look is for another decent football program to give them some legitimacy in there. More of maybe a mid-card. So they'll probably look at the ACC for another member once again. They're not going after like Buffalo, Rice, or Tulane, those other AAU schools. They're not going after them. They're too small. So leaves the ACC, and then you look at Georgia Tech, Virginia, Duke. None of them are going to leave because of all the rivalries they have in place. You're not going to. Especially Virginia's got their rivalries with North Carolina and Virginia Tech in place. They're not going to leave that. I don't see Georgia Tech leaving either, and Georgia Tech is not really, that makes much geographic sense. And the only one that makes sense out of ACC, that is AAU, that has a decent football, decent basketball programs, gives you a decent media market, is Pittsburgh. Grabbing the Pittsburgh Panthers out of the ACC for the Big Ten, I think is probably the best option to replace, Iowa State. And you put 4 teams out there in the East Coast, makes Penn State kind of happy. Now they have a rival in state. They can battle every year. Pitt has some history with Notre Dame as well, especially in the ACC when they play basketball. So there's some things that can happen with this particular one. Same thing, Pitt and Maryland. So adding those two, I think, would be adding Pitt into this mix will actually benefit everyone involved. Which means now it's going to be two other conferences changing. I mentioned the Big Ten and Big 12. Now ACC is the one's got to change. So now looking at the Big 12, now Iowa State comes back in, and who you got to kick out? Well, for them, I kind of made it easy. I got rid of the other Eastern time zone school, Cincinnati. Now streamlined the Big 12 even more from the Mississippi River to Great Salt Lake. That is the footprint now of the Big 12. I think that's, right in the real house right now, right where they should be. I think, switching out to West Virginia and to Florida and Ohio is a bit of a stretch, a needed stretch for them, because those are the programs that are best suited for the Big 12. But I think, if Iowa State doesn't go, Cincinnati doesn't stay, but you still add Memphis, Tulane, and SMU to keep the conference at 12. So now the ACC will now have, lost Pittsburgh as well as Notre Dame. Will then turn around and grab West Virginia, UCF, and Cincinnati. Now I know the backyard brawl, I always mention this is a game that has to happen once again. I still think it should happen at the end of the year-ish. I'll get to that a little bit. And this is just one of those rivalry games that has to come back. You put it around Thanksgiving. I mean, it's during that Thanksgiving weekend, like Texas A&M used to be. Do the exact same time frame. I don't think no one would mind it. They'll love it to see this game go at it once again. And then they can still continue their Black Diamond series for Virginia Tech. They still have their history with Syracuse, with BC, with Miami, Louisville, and Cincinnati. A little bit with UCF as well. So West Virginia does have some fight with a lot of these schools. And you bring in Cincinnati in. Now that helps Louisville because now they have a rival close by. Also bring in their rivalry game as a conference game. So the battle for the keg and nails is now an annual matchup once again between these two universities and another university with a decent football program. We'll see if they continue that trend after most of their class got left, and so they can restock their cabinets. And then Louisville is another one. So you got these two, I think, mid-card type of programs for football, and right now basketball too. I think Louisville basketball is kind of taking a little bit of a dip because it's a heavy-centric Carolina basketball conference. But, if you add Cincinnati and Louisville, it gives you two more decent, like I said, mid-card teams that really help solidify that aspect. Well, those are the fixes I had to come up with on to kind of counter what I did in my first video with that. So hopefully that kind of balances things out. And I think actually, they really do kind of help streamline the Big 12. Gives the Big Ten a decent sized media market as well. Gives the ACC, gives Louisville another something else to play with, a new toy, but not really. A new toy that's they rediscovered that once again. Well, now comes to the part where we're talking about my last bit of the fix, and that's the schedules. One of the things I was going to really talk about was the getting rid of the divisions. I've mentioned this a couple other times in other videos I've stated. And the NCAA pretty much told the conference now, you determine how you want to do your, how you're going to determine your conference champions. Which pretty much they're going to negate, allow them to just get rid of divisions, of which the Pac-12 has already completely announced they're gone. I know the Big 12 was talking about that. They were holding off creating divisions. So I'm sure they're going to be following suit. ACC already has something in place for a 3-5-5 schedule, which means you have 3 locked conference opponents and you rotate the other 5. They'll determine you play everyone every 2 years, which you don't have that factored in place now, which will work really good for 14-member conferences like the ACC and the Big Ten. And if you use my modest model and it's not going to quite work that well, and we'll work for my extreme makeover, but that's a different scenario. But so the NCAA kind of stole my thunder on that one. I was going to re-emphasize that completely because I think the Pac-12 had the best. Even the SEC every so often will have that as well. Especially I think the year that Auburn upset Alabama at the end, they get to the conference championship game. I mean, and Auburn had a worse record, so it should have been Alabama versus I think Georgia at the time frame, or the time frames where Oregon, Stanford were the 1-2 punch in the Pac-12, but they both play in the North Division, so they can't face off again. This will ensure that everyone gets another opportunity, like pretty much how the Big 12 is right now with their 10 members, as their conference championship game is always a rematch. It's always very good to watch. So I don't think anyone will really complain about that too much if you get a rematch. And with my particular aspect of determine this, really kind of help drive home the point of this. And I think it's going to be more of another extreme idea that probably won't be very well liked. And is to, once again, you lock your 3 conference games. So your 3 key rivals. Sometimes you might have to force a rivalry because of, realignments and new schools and areas. The Pac-12 is going to be quite easy because you do it in different regions. You got your Northeast, your Southwest, and your California schools all together, so it makes it easy for them. A little bit harder for some of the other conferences that kind of really do that. Maybe do like the SEC pods, but that one doesn't really work too well because Alabama has too many rivals and everywhere. And it just means schools have to get rid of some of them, like for North Carolina, they play Duke, North Carolina State, and Wake Forest. But what happens to Virginia? So they're not going to get rid of that Virginia game, which means you get rid of their one of their North Carolina programs and play them every other year. So with that being said, it's like, okay, so go ahead, do the 3 locks. And you kind of balance it out. Okay, which ones you want? Keep some of the key matchups. Especially like the game and the South Soul rivalry, the Iron Bowl, Egg Bowl, Red River rivalry, the Apple Cup, all those type of games. You make sure those are still in place. That's just nostalgia for the universities and the student body, and just the history involved with them. You shouldn't really get rid of them. I'm getting rid of Bedlam, but that's a different story. And going with that particular aspect, and then you rotate in 4 other games. So if you're sitting there doing the math in your head, it's like, wait a minute, that's only 7 conference games. Correct. Because I'm using that last week as a in-season playoff. That's right. I'm kind of doing a mini playoff with the conference games the very last week of the season, right before the conference championship games. And it's just, I think, it's a way to kind of really help fine-tune the eliteness of the conference champion. And I think that's what everyone wants. They want a conference champion that truly represents the conference as a whole. And if you have like a 10-2 school upset 11-1 school, no one's going to really complain too much because they're pretty much almost on the same level. Even if you have a 12-0 school losing to a 10-2 school, no one's ever really complain too much because they're within striking distance of each other. But what people don't like is when you have a 6-6 school or 7-5 school, 8-4 school knocking off your 11-1 program. No one likes to see that because then you have that not as elite for that season, winning the conference, representing the conference in the New York Six Bowl, especially if you're one of the Power 5 conferences, and nullifying them in the playoffs. But I think this aspect of doing like a mini playoff at the end of the season also has to constitute with an expansion of the college football playoff. But I'll get to that one a little bit later, kind of get my two cents on that one. And I know this will kind of redo the college football schedule as a whole, because normally that last week of the season, that's your rivalry week. This is where you have the Egg Bowl, the Iron Bowl, the Apple Cup, the game. Most of your key rivalry games are this week. Well, I just pushed it up a week. Because we're normally SEC likes to schedule FCS games anyway, so just move it up a week. And then the next week is going to be your quote-unquote conference playoffs. So 1 versus 4. So your top 4 schools will be in this little bracket. And then those 2 winners would then face off in their conference championship game. And then if you look at the rest of them, so you have 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12, depending on the size of the conference, 13 through 16, or 13 versus 14. And this is kind of help, streamline those other, that middle bracket there is kind of help streamline bowl seeding, determine who gets the higher bowl bid. And I think this will kind of, make things kind of more interesting. You probably have, no more than 2 lost teams in that top 4 bracket. You might have a 2 lost team not make it. So there'll be a little controversy there surrounding that one, which is always fun. But does this end up helping create a rematch? Yes. This is one of the downsides to this, is that you will end up creating a second matchup between schools in this playoff week. And also, the bigger the conference, the longer it takes to go through everyone. I think I looked at this. It will take like 3 years to go through 60-member conferences to play everyone at least once, which tends to be about the average playing time for a college football player anyway. So, all in all, not a totally bad idea. But if you have like a rivalry that ends up being lost because of the 3 locked, but you only see them now like every 3 years, it may not be more that advantageous to really go to this particular scenario. And I don't understand the pushback for this. I would. This is a really radical idea. But so was expanding the conferences to 12 games, all of a sudden creating a conference championship game. That was a radical idea. Then everyone started doing it. And then the 16-member conference, the WAC was a radical thing about that one, and it only lasted 3 years. Now the SEC is doing it, and then I created a version where I have 2 more of them do it. And if all of that's successful, I think the Pac-12 and Big 12 will follow suit. And then you probably see the Super Leagues being created. But it's always one of those things, those first steps are really kind of, create excitement. I mean, college football already is an exciting game to watch anyway, especially look at key rivalries and just see, like the old-fashioned hate, even though that's Georgia and Georgia Tech, which will play the week prior, or that's pretty much last week of the season. I mean, that's always just see how, they all hate each other. But outside of that, you kind of look at ways to kind of make things a little bit more exciting and give schools more fighting chance to really become national champion. Because if you look at the college football playoff right now, it is an elitist group because you only allow 4 schools. Right now, there's 133 programs currently in the FBS. At the extent of some of my realignment scenarios, it's up to 140. And you're saying only 4 schools get in? No. That's just, and most of the time you always seem to have at least an SEC program, maybe a second one, depending on the year. The Big Ten always seems to be in there now. And then the 4th one just kind of looks like the ACC is more than the Big 12 and the Pac-12. So, which gives no really true access to the Group of 5. So for Cincinnati this past year, things pretty much are being undefeated, which was different than what UCF experienced years ago. And that's the reason why I think the playoffs need to be expanded to give greater access to any quality individual. Now I know most of the time it looks like a 8-school playoff is a possibility. I like the idea of 12 because then you do a first round at home sites, and then those losers of those games then go to other bowl games. Just kind of get cycled in there. You kind of do make it an extension of the regular season basically, and then kind of do bowl games right in the middle for those quarterfinals, semifinals, of course, in New York 6, and then you have your championship game. So it doesn't really extend the season. I mean, you play more games, but it doesn't extend how long the season is than what it currently is. But you do play more games, and I get that. And they always, it's like they complain about player safety, but remember they went from a 10-game schedule to 11-game schedule to a 12-game, then allowing the conference championship games. Now you have 13. Hawaii has a special rules that allows them to play extra games than everyone else, just so they have more money generated for them because they're so far out from the rest of the landscape. So, they're always pushing the boundaries anyways. So adding a few games here and there is not that detrimental to the athletes, because you want to treat them as adults, but then you don't want to treat them as adults. You got to think these are technically adults, even though most of them are kids. But they are adults. They're 18 years old plus. Now they're getting that name, image, and likeness deals, and then there's other controversies surrounding that. Because you have been paying attention, especially with Fisher and Saban going at it, and even Dion. I mean, Saban kind of throwing some shade on everyone there. And then some of the things I think NIL is kind of doing, and how things are kind of going. And it was a bad idea. They kind of let this kind of go be like the Wild Wild West with the NIL, but that's a different story, different video, so I won't get too much on that soapbox. So, but going back to the aspect of the extended playoffs, it gives you more access. It allows the Power 5 to maintain guaranteed spots for all 5 of their champions, which is something they really, really want. Then I say, yep, go ahead and give them that, and make sure the group of 5 at least has one other playoff spot. And then it gives you then it goes depending on if you go 8 or 12, depending on how many at-large bids you get. So getting 2 at-large bids, excuse me, getting 2 at-large bids on an 8-team slot may not look very good, but then you probably still have 2, ACC and 2 Big Ten schools getting in. And just could be that. Same thing with the 12 member. If you do 12 member, you guarantee, the 4 they get the first round bye are all conference, your top 4 conference champs, which is the reason why Notre Dame would join conference. As well as all the other independent programs find a way to get into a conference to guarantee if they have the opportunity they could host it or get that first round bye. So that's kind of look at that. So in order to kind of help propel this type of thinking, that's what I thought about doing. Okay, let's do the in-season playoff to determine the top 2 schools to face off in the conference championship game. But I know the downsides to this, because now you don't know who that last game is, and then you got to fight for ticket prices and hotel rooms. You don't know if you're going to be able to make it. If you have to go, let's say Pitt is playing Illinois in the last week of the playoff week, and Pitt has to travel to Champaign. Can they get the flights in and the buses in there? Because now you go, okay, you're probably flying from Pittsburgh to Indianapolis. Do you do a little plane from Indy to Champaign, or you take a bus from Indianapolis to Champaign? Type of those type of scenarios. This is what you kind of have to look at. And getting short notice is going to cost you a little bit more. So it's going to cut into the revenue of the conferences, because now they have to help facilitate these type of flights and arrangements to get the teams there. But the average citizen, the average fan, who wants to travel from, say, Pittsburgh to Champaign or Bantam, may not be able to afford that, because the prices might be sky high because of the uniqueness of the game and the availability of seats and rooms and all that nonsense. So I understand logistically and scheduling wise and hitting the fans and the wallets. I understand the downsides of this particular scenario, but I still like it as a way to kind of generate more buzz at the end of the season, to kind of give just, not to say more legitimacy to the conference championship game, but, really spice it up, Just put a little spice. Pete's hot sauce. You put that on everything. And I just think it's just a radical idea. I think it's just, like the addition of the conference championship game in the early 90s. It was a radical idea. I think this will be a radical idea for, the next generation of football fans. It really strive on the point, and maybe they might expand that. I mean, it's just, you never know. I mean, it's just one of those, unique money-grabbing opportunities, too, because you didn't create a conference playoff. Then you could charge more for the networks to televise these games. Pretty much like the conference tournaments in, the basketball arena. Because even the Ivy League does that now. Because they realized there's a little bit of money to be made here, so let's go ahead and do that. And, that could happen. But that happening is probably a slim chance to absolutely none, because of the scheduling headaches and logistical nightmare that it would create. These are not professional organizations that probably already have deals in place to get things in there, or their private aircraft. They can just go ahead and charter an aircraft and go. I mean, maybe the bigger universities have that, but the smaller ones maybe not. So you try to make things fair across the board, and it's a little probably not as advantageous, but I still like the idea. It's revolutionary. It's visionary. It's architecturally. It's something I think college football could end up going with anyway, especially if they decide to finally expand the playoffs. And I am a big proponent of that. Those are against it, I think I've always stated they're the elitist, because they're most of the time it's the SEC guys who really, that's the loudest against this, because the SEC is always in there. And the ones that always say we need more is those that can't get in there because of the SEC. It's because they can't beat the SEC. So they need more opportunities, maybe more teams get in, maybe one of them will actually beat the SEC. It's a vicious cycle, and it's going to keep going and going until, they finally determine, no, this is what's going to happen. But, those are my ideas, and I know this scheduling one is complete left field, with no hat, no sunglasses, staring at the sun. So I completely understand that one. Just let me know down below what you really think. I mean, do you think it's too far-fetched? Do you think it is something where college football may benefit from this moving forward, especially as conferences get bigger? That's another thing, how big are these conferences going to go? Are they going to stop at 16? Are they going to start expanding to 20? Or maybe 24? Create, mini semi-pro leagues, which is pretty much how, NCAA football is going right now. Or do you think the current setup where they're at 14 is a magic number? Maybe SEC would drop a couple after a while. I doubt it. But I think the ACC's idea of 3-5-5 is excellent, because you ensure you rotate everyone at least every 2 years. So you don't really lose too much of a rivalry. So like maybe North Carolina, Wake Forest don't face off every year, but they face off every 2 years. Not ideal for them, but they get the opportunity to face them off anyways every couple of years. I think that might be beneficial. And for the ACC, that's a great plan, especially if you get rid of the divisions. I like it. Maybe go to 16, that ain't gonna work. It's gonna take you 3 years to go through everyone. But like I said, let me know down below what you really think. I mean, I'm hoping it's not too far-fetched, but I have a feeling it might be. And if you have a different version, just let me know. I mean, I read everything. I'll make corrections if I need to. As you noticed in the beginning of this video, I had to make corrections for my first video in the series. And I just love interacting with you. I love reading them all. And once you're there, you can also hit that thumbs up. You can also share this video with friends and family. It really helps promote this channel out. Once you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell notification. I'll let you know next time I post a video, and I will see you next time on Chat Sports Talk.